Okay, I think we're live here. Hello, good morning. Afternoon, yeah. I think anybody's joined us quite yet, but I'm just gonna make just a quick statement here that, hey, this is the History Speaks for the Wausau Winter Frolic. We're going to be getting it started in about 3-4 minutes here. So if you're joining us after the fact, after we've went live, and you're watching this in the future, you can feel free to skip ahead a couple minutes, just as we have a little lobby here for letting people join us. Yeah. So. Just gonna keep talking here while I double check the levels and make sure everything sounds okay. I think it should be fine. Okay, yeah. That seems to be working. Hope you are all having a wonderful afternoon. Let's see here, yep. Cool. Well, let me just, I guess while we're waiting, again, if you're just joining us, which, yeah, we went live about a minute and a half ago. So, yeah, we're getting started here just a minute, but this is the History Speaks, the second for the year that we're doing. And we're doing this live over the internet, which is exciting. Hopefully everything goes well today. But yeah, so we're going to be talking about the Winter Sports Carnival here that was held in Marathon County for many, many years, surprisingly a long time. And yeah, it should be a pretty fun story. I'm excited to finally share it with you all. I guess while we're waiting, I want to make a point of thanking our sponsor for these events. This year, Yankee Bookstore is once again very generously sponsoring these programs, History Chats and our History Speaks, which is what this is. If you're not familiar, by the way, it's a good time to plug the History Chats. That's every Thursday. Gary, our librarian, and I, archivist here, we do a little 15-20 minute history every week on Thursday. It's sort of the middle of the day. We do a brand new topic, something interesting that we think that you'd enjoy hearing about. But yeah, that as well as these History Speaks, it's possible thanks to Yankee Bookstore and all of our members. So, big thank you to everybody involved there. If you're interested in supporting, these sort of programs on Marathon County history, if you're an individual and you're not a member already, that would be a great place to start. You can check our webpage for more information about that. Yeah. So that's out of the way. I think we're going to get started. So, hey, again, thanks for joining me this afternoon. We are going to start in just a moment. So just to get this out of the way, this is the normally where we would say, silence your cell phones and save all questions for the end. But obviously, you're at home, so if you do whatever you want. I can't hear you, but if you do have any questions, comments, clarifications, you want corrections, whatever you want, feel free to put it in the comment section, the chat section. I won't be monitoring it live, but we will have some time for question and answer at the end. And I would love to hear your thoughts and be able to share some of the history. I'm doing my best to get as much in as I can today, but there's always more. So if there's something in particular you'd like to hear about, please do let me know. But with that, I think I'm going to get going here. So, hello, welcome to the History Chats on So today we're talking about the Wausau Winter Frolics for our History Chats History Speaks program. This is a winter sports carnival, and it's kind of interesting because it has a lot of facets. It's not just so in part it is a showcase of local winter sports. Let people come out and see some hockey playing and some curling and snowshoeing and things like that. So hand in hand with that is a promotion of the winter sports. It's also a big part of this is providing a fun opportunity for people in the community to get together in the middle of the winter and enjoy some community events. And then, as we'll see, it's also has an interesting combination of sort of boosterism, this attempt to try to, take this community and put us on the map by having a big carnival here in Wausau. It's try to attempt to promote us and make us the winter playground of Wisconsin, which is what we're aspiring to be, certainly in the late 20s when we get started. And over the years, it has changed, obviously. This is a program that started in 1927. And as time goes on, it was such a success that they did it again 28 and 29. And it became an annual event. And obviously, it's going to change with the times. The Depression causes a little bit of, the Great Depression in the 1930s. We got to pull back a little bit in some ways. World War II happens in the 40s. So we're going to put in the back burner in that case. There are situations like that. The 60s and 70s, there's not as much interest in organized winter sports in the way that there was earlier. So we sort of put it on hold. But hand in hand with that, even though there was difficulties in the 30s, we kept bringing it back and finding new ways. After the 1940s and World War II and the challenges there, they bring it back and find a new way to experience the Winter Frolics for the 50s. And in 1979, surprisingly, we decided to bring it back once again, for a lot of the same reasons that we did back in the 20s. So it's a long history. It's an interesting history. And obviously, in 1980, it's a very different Winter Frolic than it is in 1930. It's 50 years difference, and there's a lot of changes. But at the heart, I think there's a lot of very similarities, and that makes it a really interesting story. But we're going to start here with the 1927 Winter Frolics. This is the Frolics that gets everything up and running. And it provides a really nice benchmark. So as we go through, I will kind of then use it as an opportunity to develop it and show what happened in the 30s and 40s and 50s, and then we'll kind of move forward from there. But the Winter Frolics in 1927 starts out, it's a week-long event. So on January 24th is a Monday, and the afternoon of Monday, they have a opening ceremony, sports through Tuesday through Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then the closing ceremonies on Sunday. So the first day, like I said, there's a parade with lots of elaborate floats and costumes. It was headed by the 128th Infantry Band. Lots of other, costumes and all that sort of stuff. It ended up at the central school. That's where we end the procession, where they have a bonfire on the grounds. And then we have in the auditorium, a whole celebration, ceremonies to open this up. And it starts, in one of the big things is the crowning of the Frolic Queen. And this is going to be a staple for most of the Winter Frolics going forward. The Frolic Queen was designed it's kind of a popularity contest, but in these early years, it's especially sort of a way that we pay for the Frolic. So let me step back and say that about a couple weeks earlier, before the Frolic gets started, after we announced this was happening and what was going to be going on, they sent out nomination ballots. And as you can see, this is what you'd cut out of the Daily Herald, and it has 100 votes there. So notably, this is not one person per vote. In fact, you were encouraged to vote early and often. And the way that you would do that is by, obviously 100 votes here. If you bought a button, so the way that you'd get into the festival, and one of the ways that you support it is you'd get a button. So I don't know if you can see that. This is probably, well, I don't know if it's backwards. It might be backwards for you, but you get the idea. This is a button. You'd pin it to the back of your coat, and that's what got you in all the events. So by buying a button, might have gotten you, supporting, they would kind of do that. In later years, that's going to be the way that the Winter Frolic Queen is specifically crowned. It's just getting the buttons. But here, there's a lot of other ways to do it too. Because if you went to local businesses, if you bought a new pair of shoes, every every dollar that you purchased got you 50 free votes, as you can see from here. And then this is actually a really nice breakdown here from the Damon's Music Store. If you bought a brand new piano, you get 5,000 votes for the Winter Frolic Queen. Now, this is interesting because it does two things. One, it encourages sort of a support of local businesses as part of the Winter Frolic celebration, right? If you want to really get your candidate to get an edge that you want to support, well, you can go buy a piano or a new set of shoes or what have you, and that would help, help that process. And also, if you were just looking for a brand new pair of shoes and you didn't know about this, they'd hand you 50 free votes for every dollar that you spent. And so that allowed you to then go, oh, I guess I should check out this Frolic. So it's sort of a cross-promotion thing. But ultimately, it was a really successful thing. They had a couple dozen candidates that got anywhere from, I think the winner had 150,000 votes. And then the sort of the lower level, there were some people that just got, 110 or something like that. But this was the top 6 going into the final weekend, in which actually the vote leaders changed. There's this interesting thing that happens where over the years, there's like little strategies that emerge of holding on to votes until the last minute so that you can jump ahead. So there's often sort of changes in leaders. But ultimately in 1927, the winner goes to Ruth Miller, and she becomes the Winter Frolic Queen. And she ends up giving a big speech. That's what opens everything up here. And then they also had some speeches from people like Cyrus Yaki, who was the president of the Wausau Outdoor Sports Club, which puts on the whole festival. I don't think Fred Weichman gave a speech, but he was the secretary treasurer, and he's really the guy that puts everything together. So I'm going to acknowledge him here. And then they had some community singing. Again, the 128th Infantry Band was here, so they played a little music, some community singing, a fun time. So that was Monday. Now, Tuesday through Friday had a very similar format. Every single day, I mean, there's some differences in terms of what events are happening, but for the most part, they follow the same structure. Every day, they open it up with some fireworks from the roof of the Hotel Wausau. So that's at 12:15, so, daytime fireworks. Then people go back to work and school because it's still a weekday, still have those things. But after that, at 4 o'clock, people would gather at Recreation Park, which we know today as Athletic Park. And you can see that, it's a baseball diamond, right? Even back then. But during the winter, they would flood it and make an ice rink, and they played hockey. Now, it's worth noting that this particular picture is misleading a little bit. The official photographer of the Winter Frolic was William Lacert, who took the picture. And this is actually a promotional image that he reused. This is actually taken in 1926, so the year before the Frolic. And so this wasn't an actual hockey game that was played as part of the Frolic. There were a couple hockey games that were played at this location, but those would have been like the grade school hockey. So like Franklin School played Grant School or something like that. For the most part, what was happening here was some speed skating events and some figure skating. And they brought in a bunch of figure skaters. And this is going to be one of the big themes for the event. We have some local talent like Gertrude here, which we'll talk about her more in a bit. But they also brought in a lot of talent from outside. They wanted to kind of jumpstart the winter sports scene here, and we didn't have as much local talent. So they would bring in guys like, Hein Brock here, the clown skater from Minnesota, and the Harvester Amateur Club of Minnesota, as well as, ski jumpers and hockey teams. And, we'll talk about a little bit more of that later. So that was from 6 to 7 or to 4, 4 to 6. At 6, or for the next hour, you had a chance to maybe get some dinner and take the trolley down to the Rothschild area. Rothschild Park would have been where the next chunk of things happened, and obviously the pavilion is still here today. But there's a lot more back in the 1920s to this area. It wasn't just the pavilion, it was the park. After the dam was put in for the paper mill, it created Lake Wausau, and there's a really nice swimming hole here. There's this little land bridge, or I guess maybe peninsula is what you'd call it, didn't connect. But it created a nice little cove for people to go swimming. So there's picnic tables here. There would have been boats you could rent. This is one of the safe places you can go to swim if you're going to send your child out to go swimming on a hot summer day. There are people around, so and it's not the rush of the current at the Wisconsin River would have had elsewhere. Also behind us on the end of the sort of land area that kind of stretched out, they had things like a slide that went into the water and some fun stuff too. And of course, during the winter, when this all froze over, it was a great place to go ice skating. And so this became the center for the activities during the evening and later on the weekends. So you can see here, there's some skaters. I don't know if they're playing hockey or curling or what's going on here. But lots of stuff that you have here. So the big stuff that happened at the end of the day from Tuesday through Friday, more or less. Friday had some other interesting things thrown in. We'll talk about that in a bit. But they would have a hockey game or two. So for the hockey, we had our own local team here. We had the Wausau. Well, they called it the amateur team. These are maybe adults or young adults. We brought in a bunch of other regional teams. People from Rhinelander, Eagle River. I'm not sure if like Mosinee, I can't quite remember all the teams. There's not a whole lot of them, but enough of them to make a little tournament. So there's the amateur bracket. And then they also had the collegiate bracket, which is a little misleading because some of the teams were college guys. They were recently graduated college guys, but close enough. So they had teams from the University of Marquette, the University of Minnesota, and St. John's. And so you also had sort of two brackets that would happen. So you had the college league and the amateur league. And so Tuesday through Friday, you'd have sort of the brackets. And then at the end, you'd have the winner of each side play each other in an exhibition match. So that was a lot of fun and sort of showcased the hockey scene here, which was important. Curling is another scene that we have a lot of, people that were already doing it here, but by putting it on, boosting it up so people can see it allows for more people to learn about curling, since it is kind of a niche thing, at least initially. Now, I don't know, this picture is certainly probably from 1928 or 29, because they are in the curling barn. Although it's unclear exactly whether they had curling at Lake Wausau as part of the Rothschild Pavilion, or whether this was actually held here. They just talk about Site 1 and Site 2, and they recently flooded it. I think it was over at Rothschild Pavilion, but, and this might be partially because this is also a picture. I don't know if it's 27 or 28, but I'm not sure. You can see where they have ice skating over here, and you can see where the hockey is, but I don't know whether they would have curling. But anyway, regardless of when it was or where it was, there was curling that took place, and that was another kind of thing that was important. At the evening of each of these nights, they would be given over to a dance and festivities at the pavilion itself, the Rothschild Pavilion. So each day was given over to a specific group that helped to put stuff together. So you have the Eagles clubs on Tuesday, the Elks on Wednesday, the Legion on Thursday. Friday was a smattering of service and fraternal or service clubs. So you had the Lions, the Kiwanis, and the Rotarians. I don't know. There's also the Y Men's Club, so the YMCA. They don't have a nice circular logo, so we'll put that out there. And then Saturday was Isaac Walton League Day. And Isaac Walton League is a early conservationist group that certainly had a very growing number of people that were joining. Although, by today, they're still around today, but they're not quite as big as they were certainly in the 1920s and 30s. So then that was Tuesday through Friday. Friday, there's some other stuff thrown in there, but the big stuff was the weekend. People didn't have to go to school or work, and so we had some longer form events, and it was really jam-packed with things. So you had some cross-country skiing and snowshoeing, and these were races that people went out for. They had everything from 2 mile to I think 10 or 12 mile races, depending on how old you were, what bracket you were in, or gender. Girls and boys had separate things. There was even one race, a 4 mile race between, and I don't know if it was just a mixed thing or whether they had like literally cross-country skiers versus snowshoers, but that was a thing that they did. Then you also had throughout this period, Friday through Saturday, you had things like exhibitions of guns. So you had the rifle, an exhibition of rifles from the St. John Military Academy Cadets of Delafield, Wisconsin. They bringing up some talent. And they also had some trap shooting and skeet shooting, clay pigeons and things like that. There was a dog sled race. Dan Story, who was a big guy here, an ad guy. He had some worked for Employers Mutual and things like that, as well as I think running his own company for a while. But he was a big proponent of dog sleds, and so he ends up having a junior dog sled competition. This is the second annual one of those, and then after this going forward, it's going to just be part of the Winter Frolics, at least for a few years. There's some interesting stuff like girls hockey. We actually had 2 girls hockey teams that played here in 1927. There was the Red Robins and the White Girds. So they played hockey and basketball on ice skates, which I think is partially sort of a novelty thing. But there's that. There's a lot of other novelty stuff. They had, and this footage is from like the mid 30s, but they had barrel jumping and things like that on ice skates, just kind of fun challenges to see who could do stuff. They had like ice bicycle races, which initially I thought meant bicycles on ice. Wouldn't that be kind of a slapstick fun thing to do? But no, it actually turns out that they had special bicycles that were built with ice skates on the front wheel, and the back wheel they'd take the rubber off and they'd like make like a jagged like saw thing that would like dig into the ice. They had a horse race, like a harness horse race on the ice. They had what they called horseshoe pitching, which I think means horseshoe games. All sorts of just kind of interesting stuff here. Let me see if there's any others. Oh, here's a fun one. Ski racing behind a motorcycle was something they tried there. They had something called chariot races for the grade school kids, which meant that you had two boys skating and pulling a girl behind them, and that was the chariot. So they had a 440-yard race on that there. So yeah, a lot of kind of interesting little things here and there. And this is going to be kind of setting the stage going forward too. You have the big stuff. You've got the hockey and the curling and that sort of stuff. But you also have, for example, started that again. There we go. And in 1928, they brought in the Ashland Girls Hiking Club, which is kind of crazy to me. I don't really understand the excitement, but they were really pumped about this. And I think part of it is hiking is a new concept in 1927 and 28. On Sunday, by the way, the theme was for the morning, everybody should go to church. But they said, everybody go to church and hike there. It's kind of hard to think of hiking being a new recreational thing, but it kind of was. So there's stuff like that. And the last one that I'm just going to point out of many examples, in 1928, 29, and in the early 30s, Carl Eliasson of Sainer, Wisconsin, brought his prototype snowmobile. So this wasn't a race or anything. This was just more of a novelty. Come, get a ride on it. Just marvel at how fast it could go over the snow. But the big event, or one of the big events, the big novelty events, was certainly ski jumping. Ski jumping is one of those things that people probably didn't know very much of. Like hockey and curling was out there, right? Ski jumping is something you need a ski jump for. And so the chronology here, I would imagine in 1924, the first Winter Olympics are held in France. It's the first time we have a Winter Olympic Games. And so I think just like today, if you end up, watching the Olympic Games, you'll find yourself getting oddly interested in, some sport that you've never heard of or never thought about. Same thing here. They can't watch the events, but they can read accounts of ski jumping. Of people, ski jumping basically is you go up on top of a scaffolding like this. You put your skis on. This is all packed with snow, and you slide down as fast as you could. At the bottom, there's a lip just before the crest of the hill, and then you try to fly as far as you could until gravity pulled you down inevitably. And when you came down, hopefully you weren't, you had your skis in the right way so that you didn't tumble and, fall and maybe break something. And just reading about that was really exciting. But now in 1926, so about a year before the Frolics get started, the Wisconsin Valley Electric Company, which owns the whole pavilion and park in Rothschild, they build this. And so now people can come out and see it for themselves. And as cool as that is, it's even cooler to see international talent that came and actually took part during these years, to actually see people who were really good at this. And to the point where like, this becomes very iconic. Like this image is very common of the ski jumping clown. That's like the mascot of the Winter Frolics. And for good reason, people really enjoyed seeing it. So this is a view from the top looking out onto Lake Wausau. So you can see the down onto the lake. This is when they were actually ski jumping. So you can actually see it's a lot of people that are gathered here to watch this happen. Now, I do have to point out, though, as I was looking at this image, I was kind of concerned what's going on over here on the right over here. Because these people, what are they doing over there? And it just kind of looked off. And then I realized that they actually match up with the people over. So whoever, Lacert or whoever was in charge of this, decided to cut out some of the people and then make it look like there were more people by adding. Even in 1927, we're doing, photoshopping to making look like crowds bigger than they are, I guess. And I don't know, maybe that was a genuine attempt to try to reflect that there were people over there. It just wasn't shown. Or maybe he just thought it would be kind of I can do it, so why not? Because people won't be as concerned about it because it's a new thing. I don't know, but you can even see, the cut out around them where the paper would have been. kind of interesting just to kind of see that. Now, this actual picture is from the front cover, the very first thing when you open up I actually have a copy here, the souvenir book. So this has, so you can see the first picture here. There you go. This is just kind of, here's what you have. And I want to talk a bit about the other aspect of the Winter Frolic. It's fun. It's a great way to show off these winter sports. But you also have, and I think the boosterism is on full display. So boosterism is a philosophy that is maybe best crystallized and shown in the Winter Frolics of the 20s. You see this phrase here, "It pays to play," that's on the cup. This is kind of the unofficial slogan of the Winter Frolics. And it's actually a play on words of something that you'd see in the newspaper a lot, which is "it pays to trade at Wausau." So whenever they would get in the newspaper, you'd get down to an end of a column and there wasn't enough room to actually start a new article, they would just kind of have a couple lines. And so they would, you often see some witty statement or a joke or a Bible verse or something like that. But often the Daily Herald and, editors just like to put in this phrase, "It pays to trade at Wausau," which is part of this boosterism philosophy that's going on. So boosterism is, a very similar thing, the "work for Wausau." That's the official slogan of Wausau that gets created by the chamber, or the Booster Club, which is the precursor to the Chamber of Commerce. And they put it up on the city hall, right? These phrases are part of boosterism. And boosterism is an idea that there's this civic responsibility for every individual of a city. If you live in Wausau, it's your responsibility as a citizen to promote Wausau. It's not just being proud of where you come from, it's letting everybody know when you go on vacation, when you're traveling for business, you better let people know that you're from Wausau and you're proud of it, and just spread the word. In retrospect, I mean, if you look at "it pays to trade," that might seem like it's an idea of trying to promote local businesses, right? It's kind of like made in America or, buy local, right? But if you think about it, in the 1920s, people don't, there's no alternative. If I'm going to go, buy a new pair of shoes, I'm not going to go to Walmart and buy something built, made in China. I'm not going to go on the internet and just have something delivered to me. I have to go. I'm not going to go on a train and catch the train down to Stevens Point, buy some shoes or groceries or whatever, and then come back to no. You're going to buy local anyway. And so a lot of what this is doing is it's not saying it's a call to action, but it's not really about the call to action to trade in Wausau or to work for Wausau. It's about showing that we're all in this together. The ads lead up to the Winter Frolic. It all depends on you. We need to make this a success, because if it's a success, then everybody's going to be good. You can see this kind of sentiment here. This is the annual Wausau Daily Herald edition leading up to the second Frolic. And you open it up and it has all of these articles about what's going to happen. But obviously a lot of it's given over to advertisers. And you can see the same sort of stuff. Everybody's kind of showing that they're invested in the success of the Frolic. And they're using "it pays to play" and "work for Wausau." This is about showing, it's not about convincing people that you should do this. It's about showing that you're doing your part. And, hey, if it doesn't work, it's not my fault. It's your fault for not showing up, which is kind of an interesting philosophy. I mean, you don't think of today, if someone from the Wausau area events, goes on the radio or does an interview on TV, they don't say, "Hey, we need to make the hot air balloon festival a success. Everybody needs to come out. Otherwise, it's your fault if that Wausau is not going to be left behind." They don't say that. They say, "Hey, it's going to be a fun time," and you can see that evolution to that sort of selling of these ideas in the course of the Winter Frolics, which is really interesting to see. And finally, just to bring us back, Ruth Miller, Queen, her speech in 1927, that opening festival, it's even shown here, because aside from saying, "I hope I'm going to do a good job and I'm going to, represent the office or the position well as the first Winter Frolic Queen," she says that in addition to being a fun thing for Wausau, the festival is the city will gain much through the great amount of advertising the Frolic has received in this and nearby states. The Frolic is a good community proposition and should be held each year. And we do get, coverage in the newspapers in Wisconsin and beyond. I don't know how they picked us up in Tampa, but they do. I have to imagine that was maybe just put out on the wire. They just needed something. But yeah, people are talking about us in Tampa, Florida, which is a bit of a change. Now, it's worth noting here that even though Wausau is going to really epitomize this and really maybe be the most, brightest example of the Winter Frolic, we don't own it. It's not something we created. In fact, this article here, this ran in the Daily Herald a couple months before we announced the Winter Frolic in 1926. And it's showing Edna Johnson being chosen and being crowned as the Duluth Winter Frolic Queen. We had a midwinter frolic by the normal school in 1927 and 26. Sort of the Midwinter Frolic is sort of a prom celebration, but you also have sports festivals. Oshkosh has one in 1927. So does Madison in conjunction with the university. There's one in Green Bay. They're looking at doing one in Rhinelander and Antigo. Not necessarily in the 20s, but in the 30s, you're going to see other communities like Marshfield, which has a very, very successful long-running winter frolic. So it's not something that we own, but we own it. We make it our own, and Wausau really, becomes a part of the tradition, the annual tradition here. So, I mean, and we do have it every year. Even from the beginning, it was intended to be a regular event. It's not just something that we're going to do as a one-off thing. We're going to hold this going forward. And so I should mention all the ski jumping clowns. Ted Mayer of Mayer Shoes, he is the guy who does a lot of the art for this. So if you anytime you see a early winter frolic crown, or a lot of the artwork like this is Ted Mayer. So that's pretty cool. But yeah, it's getting bigger and better. We're just going to keep adding to it. And yeah. Now, I think at this point, we've talked a little bit about the sort of philosophy of the frolic and institutional. Let's put a pin in that and see how winter sports, because the other big thing, in addition to boosting for Wausau, we want to promote our winter sports. We want to get to a point where we don't have to bring in talent from Minnesota and Madison and wherever, right? And to an extent, this is very, very successful. Ski jumping is a great example of this. We go from bringing in ski jumpers to, in 1929, there's enough support that the ski club creates this, the Wausau toe jump, or as it's mostly known, the Stark Street jump. So this is in Wausau proper, and this is a big ski jump. It ends up becoming its own big thing. And throughout the 1930s, we hold competitions here. People are coming to Wausau, and this is one of the big, center points in the 30s of the frolic is, it's not the ski jump at Rothschild, which did its job, but now we have a bigger and better jump to use. Now, I won't get too deep into this. There's a lot of ski jumps over the years in different places. One place that is sometimes said that there is a ski jump, but I just want to clear up, there is never a ski jump on Rib Mountain. But Rib Mountain does come to its own as well in the 1930s, right? So a little chronology here. The state park gets put in 1930. So we started developing it there. It's not really until 1936, though, that we see skiing become a big thing. And a big part of this is because the Civilian Conservation Corps is established with a camp here. And the CCC is one of those New Deal, Rooseveltian sort of programs that's designed to put young men back to work. And that's going to be building roads and digging ditches and planting trees, but also building buildings like the chalet at the Rib Mountain ski hill, and developing parks like the Rib Mountain State Park, like the ski runs, like the Dells at the Eau Claire. They get started on the big old plain park. And that's going to be really helpful at jumpstarting this. And over the course of the late 30s and 40s, we're going to really see downhill skiing become a really important part of this, to the point where in 1937, they actually introduced downhill skiing as part of the Winter Frolics, which is interesting because just like, if you think about the newness of hiking as a thing, or the ski jumping in the mid 20s, they have to publish this article saying, here's what slalom skiing is, because nobody, you might not know about it justifiably. And I love here where they have the correct pronunciation, where they say, now for the word and its pronunciation, call it slalom with the accent on the first syllable, and you will be right. Slalom is also an acceptable variant, is used by many skiers in the East. So yeah, here's what this is. And it's interesting because downhill skiing has this element. You can compete in slalom or down, speed. You could, but you don't have to go fast. You can just go and hit the bunny hill and go with a bunch of friends and just enjoy yourself. You can go at a leisurely pace. You can go down once, go it's not for me, and enjoy the comforts of the chalet for the afternoon. It's all on your own. You don't have to go fast, but other sports increasingly are trying to go faster, like the Wausau Speed Skating Club, which gets established in 1934. Now, there had been speed skating, like I said, in those early years of the Frolics in 1927. And I think I don't know how organized speed skating was as a thing at that point. I think it was largely just, hey, kids, come on down, put on your skates and see who can skate the fastest. It was, they had prizes certainly, but it wasn't really like designed to promote the sport. Whereas now in 34, this is a group that is definitely promoting the sport. So here is some footage again from the mid 30s of some of these competitions. And I'm going to take a moment to note, so this footage is actually 8mm film that was digitized. And I want to thank Jerry and Barb of New Berlin. Barb's uncle, I think, was the Ziers. So Earl and Connie Zier were big outdoor enthusiasts and enthusiasts of, thankfully for us, early video. So they had a video camera, and it's really some remarkable footage. So a big thanks to them for letting us use this. So as you can see, not just speed skating, but also entertaining people. There's some sort of hijinks that they get up to as well, which is pretty kind of cool to see. Now, and it kind of leads us to the other aspect, which is figure skating. And for that, I want to talk about Gertrude Papkala. So we mentioned her and showed her the bird on ice earlier. But she's actually one of the really important to the early festivals, frolics. So in 1927, here she is in front of the Wisconsin Valley Electric Company's float. She was an employee there, and they basically told her, she wanted to get involved. They put her in a big, she's on the right here in this red jacket. They said, go out and sell buttons, so that she put her to work doing that. But she was also a really talented ice skater. And in fact, in the 1927 frolic, the very first year, she was named the best sportswoman present. And so she was given the Schofield Cup for that. And as time goes on, she and her skating partner, Herman Breckler, are going to be really important in the figure skating. So they form, again, in the early 30s, the Figure Skating Club. So this is a little bit of them, as well as the rest of this Figure Skating Club, which are doing sort of a nice pinwheel group movement sort of thing. Yeah, and they skate not just here in Wausau as part of the Frolic, but all over the Midwest competing. They won a couple of the trophies here, but also competed elsewhere. And I think this is important for a couple things. One, it shows that we have some local talent, right? It's not just people from Minnesota and Marquette and that we're bringing in. Even in 1927, there is some local talent that we can be proud of. Oh, this is Mr. Zier, by the way. So. Thanks to him and the family for taking the footage. Yeah. Also, I want to mention here, you could see, obviously, if you're familiar, this is Marathon Park. So in addition to moving the ski jumping to Wasquito Hill in the 30s, there's a nice ice rink where a lot of the stuff happens, the hockey and the ice skating, both speed and figure skating at Marathon Park. So there's Gertrude. Now, in addition to this, over the course of the 30s, you see the rise of another form of skating and sort of the figure skating in a different form. Instead of sort of competitions like this that they took part in, there were things like this. So this is some footage from the festivities at the Wausau Centennial, which was in 1939. So the 100th anniversary of the settling of what was going to become Wausau, they have a whole big year-long event. Starting with the Frolic in 1939. And as you can see, this is sort of a masquerade ball. They do a whole pageant, costume changes and music numbers. It's sort of a big part of the festivities. And this is in part another change that you're going to see. You're going to see more of a performative aspect and coming out to the Frolic and similar things for these ice carnivals, these shows, as opposed to just seeing competitive sports. Yeah. take the moment here to also mention this particular footage is actually, I believe, either taken by or we have it through Bob Geisel, who's a big guy in that time period, and his protege Bob Becker actually had the film and digitized. So thanks to them as well for taking that footage. And of course, you have the Queens. Speaking of Queens, let's talk about them, because I think, as far as the winter sports go, you can see that there's a big success. Promoting winter sports leads to bigger, better events. You have all these clubs being formed, but the frolic itself goes through some changes, and not always for the better. And I think you see this very clearly in the frolics. This is 1928, the footage here. So it's not just here somebody's, Ruth Miller's crowned, she's going to give a speech. Increasingly in 28 and 29, there's a big pageantry involved, costumes, there's a whole festivities. In 1929, Grace Prawl becomes the next queen. And she's also sort of honorary. There's the first Winter Frolic king, which is Major John Wood, who's an aviator that they honored with this. But in 1930, we don't have a queen. And part of this is the sort of excitement around the frolic kind of fades, and the depression's kind of hitting. And so some of the extravagant stuff that we've been doing in the past, we can't afford to do that. So they pull back on that. And as I said at the beginning, right, the Winter Frolic Queen is designed to sell. And if people aren't buying things, if we don't need the extra money that it brings in selling, buttons and stuff like that, then we don't really need a queen. That was the justification at that time. Since we're cutting back, we don't need to worry about the queen. That's just an extra expense. So we can just focus on what we're doing. Unfortunately, this did not necessarily help. And in 1931, there is no Winter Frolic. We can't put it on. Now it comes back again in 1932. And at this point, when they bring it back, people say, hey, what about that queen competition? Like, from an administrative point of view, it makes sense to get rid of it, but people like the Winter Frolic Queen. And so they decided to bring it back, another slate of candidates. This time, though, you couldn't buy a piano to get extra votes or shoes or whatever. It was just one person, one vote. And so the winner here is Valerita Erdmann. But again, even here in 1932, it's successful, but in 1933, we don't have a frolic. So we're still in the middle of the Depression, and we need some help getting pulled out of this. And this is when the Booster Club, or basically the precursor to the Chamber of Commerce sort of group, they step in and they put Robert Dudley in charge. And Dudley is he is the chairman. They often called him. He's the guy you want. You need somebody to head the promotional events to get the new municipal pool funded by the public. You put him in charge, he's going to make it happen. He gets involved in a big way in the Lumberjacks baseball team, in the Samoset Council Boy Scout troops. He is the umpire for baseball for many years, for Little League and things like that. And so in 1934, he gets becomes chairman of the Frolic. And so for the next 2 years, he's going to oversee this and really kind of bring it back. But the way that he does this is, again, kind of going back to the 30s. He says, let's get rid of the frills. Let's make it about the competitions. Let's get rid of, we're not going to have a big parade with lots of floats and, sponsorships and things like that. I mean, we are going to have a parade because Robert Dudley loves himself a parade. So we do have a parade, but it's just going to be people. It's going to be it's just sort of a community grassroots event. And then we can kind of, once they stabilize, then they bring back the Winter Frolic Queens. And notably in 38, there's a shift to the Booster Club ends up kind of giving over to control to a specific citizen group, a civil group that kind of runs it. And so they for 1938, they kind of experiment with maybe not having an official queen, but it's sort of a pre-dance thing. But yeah. Oh, shoot, I never fixed this. And this should say obviously 39 and 40. Whoops. But by 1940, in the 40s, we have another complication, which is the World War II. And so that gets put on the back burner. The Frolic is a big undertaking. It takes a lot of work to organize and to keep running. So what we do is we kind of put it on the back burner. We don't have it during that. And eventually we kind of bring it back. But in the meantime, Marshfield is a very strong Winter Frolic. And actually Mosinee does as well. Mosinee, which I don't talk very much about because just the nature of this, but Mosinee is another powerhouse of the winter sports scene in Marathon County. And they have, especially centered around in the late 40s, centered around the ice carnival that they have, which is like figure skating, sort of, again, kind of the show thing. They put on a Winter Frolic too. And that Winter Frolic includes some a hockey game and some curling and the crowning of a Winter Frolic queen. So it's, again, Wausau doesn't own the Winter Frolic. And in some ways, people kind of forget that we even come back after World War II, but we do. There is a Winter Frolic queen crowned at least 1949 and 50. And the fact that I'm not entirely sure about what's going on should tell you that it was not particularly well publicized or a big event. But that's going to change when in 1951, after the kind of lackluster return in 1951, they bring in the Junior Chamber of Commerce. Now, the Junior Chamber, or the JCs as they're known, I'm not sure exactly when they get started. I think back in the 30s at least. And basically, this is a group that's supposed to be a sort of training outfit for the Chamber of Commerce. This is the men who are 18 to 40 years old. The Chamber of Commerce is the group that does the, they're the boosters, right? They're going out there, getting the name out there. They're putting, publicity and trying to get businesses to relocate here. The Junior Chamber, the JCs, they kind of figure, this is an opportunity for these guys to network, to show and develop their leadership skills in putting events on. And maybe the biggest one that you're probably aware of is the 4th of July celebration at the Marathon Park, which is still being held, although the JCs themselves, as I understand it, are not still around in the same way, but the committee got spun off and they still do this. But they do a lot of other events. And again, kind of focused on not necessarily doing something so that it gets in the papers all over the country, but just to put on a good, fun thing for the community. And so that's what they do. In 1952, they sponsored this, and in the 1952 to 53, and during the summer or sort of non-winter months, they put together, reach out and bring in members of the ski club, the hockey club, speed skating, figure skating, and curling, and they create the Wausau Winter Sports Council, which kind of has two goals, or two major goals. One is to promote these winter sports by creating programs and getting funding to support teaching curling and speed skating, et cetera, to younger kids in elementary school through high school. And the second thing they do is make sure and work together to make the Frolics a success. And the Frolics then also transforms into a showcase for these winter sports. For they have adult events and other stuff too, but at the core, it's about showcasing, it kind of like how 4-H kind of takes over the fair, right? The county fair, it becomes a showcase for the 4-H club. And a lot of the reason we have the fair is to support 4-H, right? Similar thing here. Except for winter sports. And the proceeds of the Winter Frolics then go back to these programs to help the sports. And so we have a big rejuvenation of winter. This brings a new energy and a new sort of direction by bringing in the JCs. And so we have the return of ski jumping, figure skating, curling, hockey, and speed skating, downhill skiing too. And then there's broomball, which I haven't talked about because it's kind of hard. But I mean, back in 1928, or 27, the first Frolic, they had broomball. And actually, low-key, the broomball is one of the big events that is held throughout this era, even up into like the 80s and 90s. I mean, today, broomball is still around. It's not as prestigious. So for example, here is, again, some great footage from the 30s. This is about the only footage or actually pictures I can find from this era of broomball. Let's see. So it actually is a little misleading because they're on skates, which they shouldn't technically be doing. They should just be without skates. That's what broomball is. But it's basically hockey, more or less, except instead of sticks, they're having brooms. And instead of a puck, you got balls. And so, yeah, it's a longstanding tradition of having this. Again, not a lot of pictures. People don't necessarily document it. It's maybe not as prestigious as hockey, but it's a long running and big tradition in winter sports here. Also, we have the return of a queen, of course. Now, this is interesting in that in the 30s, they had gotten rid of the whole, the winner of, it was just a straight popularity contest for the queen. But in 1950s, they'd bring back the winner sells more buttons. So I have an example here. Again, along with the parade and the masquerade balls and stuff like that. Again, I don't know if this is backwards for you, but this is actually a 1956. It's sort of an aluminum cutout, but you sell the most of these, you get credit, and then that's how we crown the Winter Frolic Queen. The winner here, by the way, is Janet Dopke, I think. Is how you pronounce that? Anyway. So here we have this very successful, running thing. And of course it changes over the years, but at the heart of this, you can tell, help us help your kids. This is not about promoting Wausau or getting businesses or, whatever. It's about helping us help your kids. And this is great until it isn't. And this is something that I don't quite have an explanation for. But in 1959 and 1960, all of these organized winter sports just sort of disappear. There is the final Winter Frolic is 1959. They don't have it in 1960. It's not back in 1961 or 62. It just kind of stops for a while. Hockey is out of the schools by 1958, 59. The last ski jumping tournament that I can find documented was up in Brokaw in 1960. Again, a junior ski jumping championship, but it's gone after that. The skating, speed, and figure, those clubs basically stop. They stop meeting. There's no organized things happening after that. Curling is kind of its own thing. They go off and they're fine. They kind of have their own thing. I'm not going to get deep into that story necessarily here. But what's really interesting is we don't really know why. Nobody really talks about it. And it's kind of a chicken or the egg situation. Is the Winter Frolics no longer in existence because the winter sports they support are gone? Or are they gone because the Winter Frolic is not around to support them? Maybe it's a combination, maybe it's neither or both, I'm not sure. What I do know is that there is a shift in the way that people are engaging in outdoor sports. If you look at the popular sports that emerge in the 50s and 60s, a lot of it is very personal. It's very, this is the sort of thing of like hunting and fishing, right? Ice fishing. Ice fishing is actually featured in the Winter Frolics in 1958 and 59. Not the most interesting spectator sport, I would imagine, though, right? So I don't know. I think, but the reason that people go ice fishing is not competitive, which is basically how the Winter Frolic exists. The Winter Frolic is a showcase of competitions, of the speed skating, who can jump farther on the ski jumps, who can win the most games in hockey. That's kind of at the center of it. Hunting, ice fishing, that's something you go out and you get away from. I think there are certainly people who pride themselves on being able to catch the most fish, but I think it's mostly about getting away from your life. It's about the camaraderie of sitting in a shack with some friends, enjoying some beverages and listening to the Packer game on the radio or something like that, right? That's what ice fishing is. It doesn't quite fit in the same way that it's going to be showcased in a Winter Frolic. So yeah, but that's the best that I can answer. I don't really know the answer necessarily. And certainly, to be fair, I think what ends up happening is without that adult generation, as people are going off in other directions, for example, the ski jump up in Brokaw here gets built in 1939, brings back ski jumping in a big way over the course of the 50s. But by the end of the 50s, it's just not enough. We need to keep building a better and bigger ski jump, and there just isn't the community centered around it here, like there is, for example, in Eau Claire, where they do build a new ski jump, in the 60s. It just doesn't. And so, even though we have like little one here at Hammond Park, and there's a whole other bunch of them that I won't get into. Well, I'll just list a couple briefly. There's one on Sloan's Hill. There's one in Parcherville. These are sort of smaller training ones. There was one actually on Schofield Hill, which is not in Schofield, but confusingly is where the Schofields used to live, on the hill behind Tom Field. So there's a bunch of these little ones, right? But we really need, in order for the sport to really thrive, you need to have support for the thing. And while ice skating and hockey and things like that, come back, and ice skating, you really don't need a lot of equipment. You really need a ski jump in order to ski jump. And so after it comes down in 1966, there just isn't that support for that. So maybe as people go a different direction, for whatever reason, they're not willing to support the organized winter sports. And I should say, people are still skiing and skating and playing hockey and all of these things. It's just not as that organized fashion that there was in the 50s. But we do have the return of the Winter Frolics in 1979. Which is interesting because, again, like I said, people are still skating and skiing and playing curling and hockey. Hockey returns to the schools in a new fashion by the end of the 70s. And in 1979, or rather 1978, as they're looking at it, they decide it's time to make a return. Now, the justification, Ray Kurtzhofer was the president of this early group. He said that it was a good opportunity to fight off the winter doldrums. And that was a big part of this, right? To provide a fun activity for the people of Wausau to go out to. It's worth noting, it's that goal of becoming the winter playground of Wisconsin had kind of taken, we have Rib Mountain, we have curling, and we have, it's a great place to go for winter sports. And so we ended up take advantage of that. And of course, as part of this too, it's the same reasons that they did it back in the 20s, to promote winter tourism, to get people to come, to put on a fun event for everybody. And that's what they do. But now there's an interesting sort of thing in that they're going back and consciously trying to go and celebrate the old times. They're going back to the Winter Frolics of old. And you can see this here in the program. For the first year, they bring back Mr. Mayer's ski jumping clown. And if you flip through it, it's got pictures of the Frolics from the 20s and 30s, and they're recounting the stories, and they're trying to bring our historical heritage as a way of promoting an event, and which is kind of a cool thing. Now, granted, winter clowns don't really play as well in 1980 as they did in 1930. So in 1980, we do switch to this guy instead. But even then, throughout the 80s, there are attempts to consciously go back and build on the traditions of the 30s. In a way, or not just the 30s, but like the past Winter Frolics, in ways that sometimes are accurate and sometimes are not. And a great example of this is the Ice Castle or Ice Palace, right? So they as part of the recounting of the stories of old, they remembered, hey, back in 1930, here's this picture of the Ice Palace. And so they decide in 1981 to build a Ice Palace of their own. And you can see that they're very consciously, or I don't know if you can from this, but they're very consciously building it off of the old picture. Now, you may be wondering why I didn't talk about this earlier, and that's because this actually didn't have very much to do with the Winter Frolics at all. This was actually Santa's palace, where Santa came in December, and of course, he's got to find out what his friends, the boys and girls of Wausau, want for Christmas. And so, but he's also used to the cold of the North Pole, and so he wouldn't be comfortable staying overnight in a hotel. So we have to build him a nice house for him outside in the cold out of ice so that he could be comfortable. At least that was the pretense, right? And by the end of the December, by the time Christmas came around, this wasn't still there. But maybe it doesn't matter. It's part of the building on tradition is you can take inspiration from something, and even if it was true that this is part of the Winter Frolics, they find other ways to develop it, and they make it into an ice castle, and it becomes a new tradition in its own right, which is kind of indicative of this. Bring back the Winter Frolic Queen, of course. So here's a couple queens. Again, it goes back to selling buttons. Let's see if I have an example. Yeah, here's 1979, the buttons. And there's a couple different varieties of these over the years. There's also a bunch of other events. So just kind of to go through them, some of them they bring back. They have a curling tournament in 1979. They have a hockey game exhibition. They do a whole sort of variant on this, which is not winter sports played in the winter. So we have some golf in the snow. We have softball in the snow, volleyball. We have ice fishing, again, makes a return. Again, I don't know how interesting this would have been to watch, but maybe to participate, that's cool. They had community events like a gong show, which is published, supported by the JCs in 1979. They had dances, like the Norwegian dancers came and did a performance. There was new traditions like the bearing of the medallion. So the snow medallion would be hidden somewhere on the public land in Marathon County, and then they would give clues every week or every couple days to kind of narrow down the search. And the first person that could find it and report it and bring it back to the Chamber of Commerce would get $300. So that was a really fun, long-standing thing. They also tried to make use as best they can of the technology and the changing popular culture around winter sports, like snowmobiles. Now they had winter, so snowmobiles is an example of something in which they do have competitions, right? They have races, but that tended to actually be, and they did have some races as part of the Frolics, I should say. But like they found out in 85, it's really expensive and it doesn't necessarily bring back the money. But what's maybe, again, similar to like ice fishing, while people do compete in snowmobiling, a lot of what snowmobiling about is the individual experience of being out in the outdoors, maybe with a friend or a family member, or maybe as a group, sort of the communal aspect of it. And so what actually takes, is really popular is the snowmobile torchlight parade, where they would, have lit torches and they would proceed. I think the route was for most of the time from Bluegill Bay Park down to Trails End Tavern. And so they would light up the river as they went past. There's a lot of events. There's a lot of events that they have. Maybe too many events. This is from, the schedules from 1982 and 84, respectively, left and right here. And even here, I think this is just the big events. They also had a lot of side events. I think, maybe this is me as a historian reading into this a little too much, but I think part of this is they have that thing. We have to get it to. Back in the 20s and early 30s, this was this big event for the community, and it's got, we got to build that snowball up as quick as possible, and let's just throw whatever, any ideas that somebody has, let's just put it in there. So they did have, some great events that took place, but the winter sports element, I think part of it is, as they found out in the late 50s, winter sports don't fit in the same showcase like they did in the past. So you can't have speed skating tournaments in the same way. People aren't going to come out to watch that or participate in the same way. And the stuff that they fill this in with sometimes doesn't quite, congeal and make for a nice, coherent program. There were years where, just taking the winter sports, the curling disappears after like 1981. I think they stopped having a Bonspiel or tournament with the Frolic. They end up doing things like, the hockey game, DC Everest is playing Wausau West, so we'll just make that the hockey exhibition of the Frolic. And when that kind of worked, there were years where they just did that for the basketball games that were that week, or the swim meets, or the wrestling tournament. And that maybe kind of dilutes it a little bit. And the stuff that they were filling, there's stuff like, there were belly dancing shows, donkey basketball, which is basketball played on donkeys. They had cribbage and bridge tournaments, checkers tournaments. They had art shows and literary panels. The author of Real Men Don't Eat Quiche did an appearance at the public library. They had many dances and art shows and fashion shows. And I think what ends up happening is, it very clearly becomes a bit too much for the organizers. And as the novelty of it kind of wears off, because the stuff that they're building the snowball with is kind of falling apart, it's a lot of work to keep this all packed together. And ultimately in 1986, the organizers say, there's not enough volunteers anymore. It's just a small group of us. We could not get this up and running. So we're going to take 86 off. We're going to be back in 87. It's going to be better and bigger than ever. And they were half right in that. It is back. They rebrand it as Snow Magic, the Snow Magic Festival, which I think is maybe a good idea, at least from a historical perspective. Then you're not having to contend with this history, which maybe helped to get that interest initially, but kind of limited it in what it could actually be, and maybe in a way. And they return with 26 events instead of like the 50, 60 events that they were trying to hit in the early 80s. In 86, there's 26 events over 4 days. And if you look at the events, they're the stuff that works, that's popular, that people are going to come out to. And this is the case over the course of this. This is going to end in 1992, but over the course of its run for the next couple of years, shorter events that are going to be targeted and be successful and really can be promoted in a big way. And it helps that after 1989, they do it in conjunction with the Badger State Winter Games. So they can have this and not have to worry about putting on a Nordic or alpine skiing or a hockey game or curling competition. They can just have some broomball, have some snow softball, and it's just some of the fun stuff, right? Because the Badger State Winter Games do come to Wausau. Wausau has that reputation of being one of the most, winter playground of Wisconsin. And so we do, and to this day, a lot of the events are held here. It's one of the strengths, certainly of the community, in many ways. Yeah. And I will say that even though the Winter Frolic turned Snow Magic is not a thing anymore, for maybe good or bad, I don't think it would. I think you'd struggle to have the same sort of thing, especially now that we have the Badger State Winter Games. I think you would struggle to have that sort of competition, be here today. But even the snow magic, the way that they found to succeed and go forward, they maybe gave up on some of the aspect, like the crowning of a snow queen, magic queen and things like that as time went on. But a lot of the DNA of that festival and what worked in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s, continues to pop up here and there in other events. So yeah, and over the course of this, I think, the stuff that you can pull out of this is, if it wasn't for the the Wausau Winter Frolics, that laid the groundwork. It was successful in a lot of things, and putting Wausau on the map, making us a destination for winter tourism, and all of that, and certainly was a very great and successful event for the community, and I think that is its legacy. And I think that's where I'm going to call it. I never know quite how to end these, but I think that is the ending that we're going to go with. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed. And now I'm going to take an opportunity. I haven't been checking the chat or the comments. I'm going to go do that. If there's something that you're curious about, you want to know about, any comments, questions, I'm going to give you a couple moments and take this opportunity to promote some stuff coming up. You may have noticed I didn't talk very much about, some of the sports, right? If you want to know more about some of these sports, there's good news. As I said at the beginning, we do a weekly session where Gary and I kind of go back and forth. And every week we have a discussion about a topic. And in January, we did winter sports. So if you want to know about hockey, ski jumping, curling, snowmobile races, those are all, we did a 15-20 minute sort of separate thing on them. So if you haven't seen those and you're interested in them, I'd recommend them. If you go to our YouTube page, we have those, and I actually edited them down so there's not this sort of awkward stuff in between. You can just search the History Chats or Marathon County Historical Society, and that'll get you there. Speaking of History Chats, they're still going on. Every Thursday at 12:30, we do one of these. But, it's 15, 20 minutes, give or take. Probably, less than half an hour. So if you're looking for something, next week, we're going to be back, and Gary is going to be telling us about the railroad map. This is part of a new thing that we're going to be doing where over the course of what we're calling March Mapness, we are talking about maps. So we're going to take a type of map, like a railroad map or a plat map or something like that, tell you about what it is and what you can learn from it, how to read it if it's necessary, and pull out some really cool stories that you can see in it. So that starts next Thursday with Gary and the railroad map. If you're interested, you can always check those. And finally, just while we're talking about Gary and our programs, we can announce here that our next History Speaks is actually going to be next month. So we do one of these bigger ones every month, and it's going to be on grocery stores. So Gary Gisselman, you may have caught his great presentation last month in January to start off the year about shopping downtown in Wausau, and now he's going to expand that to talk about specifically grocery stores and the development into supermarkets and all of that fun stuff. This may not be the final title, but it'll be a fun program, and so if you're interested in that, keep an eye out. We'll have more information as time goes on. Cool. Well, I'm going to go see here about checking the chat here. Okay. So again, if you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, let's see here. Oop, here we go. Okay. Oh, Nancy mentioned that she's watching Green Bay, and she was the Winter Frolic Queen in 1979. Awesome. Cool. Well, thanks for joining, and hope you enjoyed the picture there of you from the, let's see, I think you're in here, right? You think at this point I would know? Yeah. Oh, wait, did I get the, okay, yeah. Cool. All right. Well, it doesn't look like there's any other questions, at least at the moment. Again, thanks so much for joining us this afternoon. I'm glad to have the opportunity to share this story. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you come back and join us in the future for the programs that are coming up. A lot of cool stuff, a lot of cool history that we're going to try to showcase for the coming up. So again, thanks for joining us. Oh, I did get your name incorrect. Shoot. Oh, sorry about that. I kind of it was transposing for different places, but let's see. What should it be? Is it still Tamak? Oh, it is. Okay. Huh. That's weird. Well, maybe I'll correct that on the edited video. I'll make sure that I get the right name there. Sorry about that. Okay. Anyway, again, thanks for joining us. I think I'll call it there. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and we will see you sometime in the future.